Hey, good morning, Internet. Broadcasting live from the 25th floor of the basement is the latest conversation over the fence early in the morning. What's this one going to be about? How about a nuclear waste tale? Those are always interesting. So, somewhere along my career path, I was working in a large chemical facility, actually two plants. I helped start up and commission down in Houston. And decided after 3 years I was enough of Houston and the chemical industry and wanted to get back northeast near to my parents who were ailing and eventually passed from cancers. So it all worked out, but it was an odd adventure. So beautiful wife and I packed two young children up in Houston and set off like Beverly Hillbillies headed to Maryland. I had gotten a contract with about a fourth tier vendor with a Department of Defense contract to vitrify low-level nuclear waste. So you could, the geek in me is like, hey, who doesn't like nuclear waste, right? But you look at these opportunities, and first off, if you don't do the job, somebody else will. So I knew going into this what it was, or had a good idea, and thought I could do good, and I did, for what it's worth. So anyway, we Beverly Hillbillied up to Maryland and got permits to live there, rented a house, and I started off with my new job as a senior chemical engineer writing low-level interlocks for a frit bin conveyor system which fed glass beads into a furnace to be mixed with nuclear waste and encapsulated. Simple, right? It's, not a big, you just take some glass and you mix some stuff in it and you're all done, right? So my job specifically was low-level interlocks. If-then things that if these conditions occurred, the plant shut down in some reasonably orderly fashion, and cement trucks were ordered to come fill the whole facility in with concrete because it was done. If my interlocks tripped, they were primary interlocks in the cluster that initiated very low-level software that just slam shut everything because it's nuclear. So that's the criticality of this little short piece of code I'm supposed to write. It's a tri-state logic, basically. Two things got to be running all the time or ready, or you shut the plant down and you order concrete to fill this billion-dollar facility in. So no pressure. Again, as a senior engineer, I knew exactly what I was looking for and what my expectations were. I'm going to go through the control system hierarchy and structures from a hardware level. These were compressor sets made by 3 different suppliers, so each had a different control schema. So in a case like this, I've got to look at the full path the conversation is being had along and the timing of that path within milliseconds of a million other things going on. So no big deal. So I get to Maryland. This job, you can go look up in federal pay rates what a senior chemical engineer, senior nuclear chemical engineer would be billed for to the Department of Defense. And my names are out there in the contract somewhere. So we're moving along. I only did this job for about 6 months. We're moving along. I'm getting huge education in a new clustered distributed control system that's going to run this plant. We're writing software that's being tested against a whole nother parallel control system with software developers meant just to test our software and make sure it's doing what it's required to do. So, yeah, big job, big job. From my perspective, the last thing I had done was sent off letters through the chain of command regarding the control flows. It was a very segmented technology, and it's also a huge corporate structures. You know, I'm number 4 down in the food chain from an organizational layer, but up in the project level, I'm up there. So big deals. Anyway, it's chugging along, and this is called the Savannah River Site Dwpf, Defense Waste Processing Facility, in the 80s, early 80s. So all of a sudden Congress defunds the project. I'm asked if I want to come interview with DuPont down in SRS area to come continue on the project on these low-level interlocks. They'd already invested probably about 4 months of training in me, and I did get it. And I already had it, so some big advantages. But I chose not to interview with them. I didn't want to go back down south. I wasn't that interested in being near this industry. I saw kind of how segmented it was and how easy it could be for things to slip through the cracks. And frankly, being that close to that much waste wasn't enticing. So that's a case where I left a 6-digit salary back down to 5 digits and never went back up there again. And when I made the decision, it was, hey, I love science. I could do this. It's not a question of abilities. It's a question of ethics. So I didn't take that path. It'd be in a different place if I did. There's stories through all of this. So what's significant in this SRS Dwpf project? Well, the premise of this was the vitrification of low-level nuclear waste. These are the papers, this was the reading I was doing on it. The initial design was to encapsulate whatever materials, radioactive in this case, to encapsulate them in glass beads so that the molecules are bound inside the glass. If they do decay, their decay elements shouldn't be able to escape that glass, so it can't leach out. You don't have to worry too much about leaching unless you are an idiot, and that nuclear industry is. So that was the design as I left it. Again, I was managing a system that measured and weighed the incoming glass against the volume or mass of incoming waste to make sure the mixture ratios could do what they needed to do, pumped into a blast furnace, and then magic happened and you got a bunch of glass beads out the other side. My understanding is that changed. One of the options was to go to just liquid glass and pour it into drums, and that ends up being the end path they took. So what's big in this? Well, the first item is the federal government defunded this project. So officially somewhere in 84, 85, I've got the dates in my record somewhere. The federal government said, no, we are discontinuing this project. What really happened was the project was almost mechanically done down at the Savannah River site, and DuPont just picked up the work and it turned into a huge federal skunk works. What that means is the science from it disappeared. It's as if it never happened because there were some problems with how it happened to begin with. But the SRS Dwpf did run, it did vitrify low-level nuclear waste to my understanding. But that's a whole nother conversation what that friggin' word even means, because they're assholes. So yes, the project disappeared, it got completed, it ran a cycle, and poof, it's gone. Now we have another huge waste pit of radiated materials sitting down in Georgia somewhere waiting to do what nature's going to do with it, because we don't have it. Well, we have clues. We just don't want to talk about it because Betsy DeVos wants our children stupid. All right. Part number 2 to this, though, is when I moved out to Washington State some decade ago, and now in Portland, I've been following and watching the Hanford site. As mentioned in a previous video, I knew of the Hanford site because its sciences revealed an aquifer flowing to the east with pollution in it that we didn't know existed. Cool science, cool stuff, right? We discovered an aquifer, only we discovered it because we polluted it. Nice, we're good. That's science. All right, so SRS Dwpf project got defunded, disappeared, yet still ran. I mentioned the Hanford site, and why is it relevant? Hanford is building a glass vitrification plant. And I'm watching the follies with that plant over decades, following their science and their lack of science and lack of reporting, and how they're hiding, how they're not conveying some of the information they probably ought to. So when I follow Hanford, when I go look, I see absolutely no mentions of the SRS Dwpf program. I don't see anything about its emissions, its efficacy, the equipment, how well it worked, how it didn't work, what went wrong. Now, one of the reasons is these are trade secrets. It was absolutely a different engineering house, different engineering stream that's involved over at SRS than is involved here. If you want to get into the chemical names behind it, that's another video. It's on the list as well. Dow, DuPont, Cargill. They make products that are for other products. You don't see them. They're the sub-products, the plasticizers that make plastics, the oils that make oil, the orthoxylene that makes phthalic anhydride. Where do you get orthoxylene from? Okay, so the science of glass vitrification was basically started in France. They've been doing it for a couple of decades now. The science of glass vitrification of nuclear waste has been studied and tried at the Savannah River site on the East Coast, the largest plutonium dump in the world, and they're playing with that. And it has been studied at the Hanford site. It's the most advanced physics research on the planet. Its funding has made the instruments that do most everything else that we do in the sciences, simply because it's molecular, it's cosmic, cool stuff that matters and could in the future. Is fusion a potential? Yeah. Is science a potential? Yes. Is commercial nuclear as it is a potential to kill us? Yes. It's mismanaged. There's no waste stream. There's no place for the waste to go. They haven't worked it out. They've been leaving it sitting for decades, playing dance games to make money. And frankly, it's our money they're spending. Good luck doing something with this. I've been trying for 10 years now, seriously. All I've done is studied the physics and the sciences behind this, trying to dig out as best I can and understand. So there's another video for you. One little piece and I got more. Amazing career. So to close out, the more I look, I'm the member of a fifth column. And I always have been. I'm an ex-Marine. The military trained me. They gave me the foundations in this stuff. both ground radar systems and something called metrology or PMEL. So I had two MOSs out of the service that guaranteed me a job, and I went to school instead. Didn't finish that either, but just a part of the story on the way. So, tip of the hat, Semper Fi. Go Bernie. His voice is important. It might not be Bernie, it's his voice. Take a listen.